And it's my pleasure to turn the program over to a really interesting media panel moderated by our Director of External Communications, Neve Elis.
Thank you so much, Ilana. Don't worry if the food coma is starting to set in. This is time to wake up. It's going to be great. Today, we've heard students and education professionals discuss anti-Semitism on campus, and we've heard government leaders give their perspective on policy. Now, we want to take a step back and look at how our public discourse shapes anti-Semitism and vice versa. For years, public discourse, or the public square, meant newspapers, radio, and television. But today, every individual has the power to impact discourse through social media and have an impact far beyond what we could have fathomed even just a decade ago, for better and for worse. Meet Ariel.
I have learned that I cannot change anyone's mind on social media, but what I can do is reinvigorate and light someone's flailing fire to be proud of their Judaism. I'm a Jewish writer and I host a sex comedy podcast. I have experienced a lot of anti-Semitism on online spaces, and every day I have a little crisis about, well, should I just stop posting about Judaism because I'm losing followers? Hundreds by the day. I have 84,000 followers on a verified platform. When I post about anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, and just Zionism in general, pride for Israel and the Jewish people, people will always unfollow me, because how Eve Barlow has kind of put this is that there is a mini social media program. That is how they are silencing us. I was posting about my fear of anti-Semitism skyrocketing, and I was deleted just for that, for just being afraid, knowing that Israel and the media would cause a spike in anti-Semitism. I'm grateful that I am equipped to continue fighting this battle, even if I have to for the rest of my life, because it just feels right.
Today, we have a panel of experts who can share their insights about how anti-Semitism is playing out across both traditional and social media, and what we can do to improve the landscape. First, please welcome David Yaris, founder of JSwipe and Millennial. JSwipe is the #1 Jewish mobile dating app, and Millennial is a digital and social media agency. Good idea. Next, we have Eden Cohen, founder and president of A Wider Frame. A Wider Frame is a free newsletter that gives readers quick, easy, and comprehensive Jewish world news all in one place, delivered right to their inbox. Thanks, Eden. And finally, we have ROTHSTEIN, CEO of Stand With Us, an international and nonpartisan Israel education organization that educates people of all ages and backgrounds, challenges misinformation, and fights anti-Semitism. Thank you guys all. Each of our panelists has played a significant role in using their media platform to address and respond to rising anti-Semitism, and we're excited to dive deep into the topic with all of them. I'm going to start with you, David. We've seen society become more polarized along just about every possible line, and that empowers the fringes, including anti-Semites. How big of a role do you think social media plays in that, and what can we do about it?
First, thank you so much for having this conversation. Thank you all for being here. And thank God this group is coming together to discuss this right now. Also, I apologize if I offend anyone. I'm not trying to offend anyone with anything that I say, but it might happen. I think the most important thing to note is that the algorithms are designed to fuel outrage. They're designed to fuel engagement, and the more engaging it can be, the stickier, the more angry you get, the more likely you are to share. So we're seeing the polarization from the rapid sharing of, light form, memified content on deeply nuanced, issues such as this, and it's really, really dangerous. A quick story, I was in a conversation the other week with the CEO of a global Jewish organization, and I was telling him all of the things that are happening online, and he says something like, I think you're exaggerating a little bit. Anti-Semitism, it's always been there. Now people just have a voice or a microphone to share it. And first, it just, both blew my mind, and also was kind of like, it's a little expected, but this is what I'm not worried about anti-Semites proper having a voice. I'm worried about the now mainstream of people who really don't know one way or the other, but they are seeing tidal waves of misinformation and deeply anti-Semitic, anti-Israel content that's passing through trusted channels that they believe in, that I myself have shared over the last year because they became the most, believable, shareable voices on, progressive issues. And then I'm worried about people who don't know what they're sharing is anti-Semitic, and the impact that's going to have on all of the young Jews who already were kind of iffy or unclear or less engaged, but now being Jewish or saying the word Israel feels like, a bad word, and that's really scary.
I just want to quickly follow up on that. You mentioned right at the beginning the algorithms. Is there a conversation happening in the Jewish community about how those algorithms should be changed, what we should be advocating for along those lines, or is that a conversation that's not developed yet enough?
There's a conversation happening in the broader social media or tech landscape. There's an organization, I might remember, the Center for Humane Technology, that's all focused around, debunking or at least providing awareness to the public around these issues. Light progress. I don't know if it's happening in the Jewish world, but there's definitely a lot of tools that can be utilized that I think we'll be speaking about this a little bit later, but we are getting just crushed on with very little effective representation from our side.
And right now, those are the algorithms that we have, and we have to fight them with what we have. Eden, can you tell us about A Wider Frame? Why did you create it? How does it fit into the media environment as it relates to anti-Semitism?
Sure. So I started it because a majority of my friends, both non-Jews and Jews, really had almost no idea what was going on in the Jewish world at large. They, would always come to me and ask me when something would happen. They didn't know how to vocalize when Israel was under attack. They didn't know how to defend. They didn't even know what was happening. They had no idea the extent of anti-Semitism worldwide. And also because Western media sources just aren't reporting on, unless it's the most heinous attack, we're not hearing about it, and they weren't reporting on it. So I did it because also a lot of young people, even young Jews, aren't really going to the traditional Jewish media to look this up. And I was. So I started it really as, to inform my friends, this is what's happening in the Jewish world, and this is why you should care. And I felt like there was a real void in any online social media, like Jewish accounts that were appealing to young people, and maybe young people who were a little bit unengaged and didn't really already kind of get it or weren't in the know already. So, and for those of you who don't know what it is, we have a bi-weekly newsletter and we have social media presence as well, and we'd like to scale up in several ways. But one day I just kind of was done banging my head against a wall, and my husband's in a band. I called the guy who runs his website and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to make a website. I don't know how to work MailChimp. Can you walk me through it? And he worked with me for the next month or so, showing me what I need to do, and I launched it. So.
And I think one of the questions that a lot of people have is, how do you engage those people that typically aren't engaged? So what do you think is working from what you're doing that's getting through to those people?
Of course, just report. Anti-Semitism gets shared the most. Mm-hmm. Fortunately or unfortunately, I think of course it's horrible, but a lot of people wouldn't know about what was going on, and a lot of people tell me that. Like, I would have had no idea that this was happening. We also try to report on what's going on in Israel and geopolitically in the region, which, some people are interested, some are not. But as far as what works and what sells, anti-Semitism sells the most, unfortunately. But I think in a way, people's eyes are starting to open, and certainly with the latest conflict, people are really starting to get it now. It's something, probably all of us here knew about before, but maybe not to the extent.
I can certainly say from personal experience that it's felt more real in recent years than it has when I was growing up. Roz, we've heard so much advice that this is not a war of facts, but emotions. Your group, Stand With Us, specializes in turning around messaging quickly. What works and what falls flat?
So we've learned that storytelling is very important. People will be willing to listen to facts if you personalize it. So if they know you, if they know a story, they may in fact engage. One picture that is good is worth 1,000 words. So you could take the head of Hamas, and he is holding his child, and the child is holding a gun. How many of you saw that picture? You didn't? That's good. So anyways, it went viral because it is such a message of, like, what are they doing to children? Look at the violence they're teaching in Hamas. And so you take one picture and really, think about how you want to tell that story. But stories are really important. So the Navajo Nation is having a water problem. They have a water shortage. So Stand With Us got involved and brought water gen from Israel. They make water out of air, to the Navajo Nation. So now we have this huge partnership going on. There's a story to tell, and there was a lot of interest. It was covered by so many papers, including the Navajo paper, including Native American papers. So, you tell a story and think about how you want to, bring everything together, and it does work. It does work. So, that's one important way.
Absolutely. I think as a reporter for many years, I can attest that I agree that a narrative holds much, much deeper than a statistic. So I want to open this up to everybody. When we look at the conversation around Israel in specific on social media, a lot of people feel like the pro-Israel side is losing. That may be informed by posts from, say, international supermodels with 44 million followers. But are we really losing the battle? Is that just a perception that we have? And if so, what can we do about it?
I think if people feel that we might be losing, then we're already losing, in the sense that if we aren't radically clear on how stacked the entire social media landscape is against us in terms of reach, in terms of beautiful content, in terms of trust, then we really need to somehow wake everyone up to that as soon as possible. But we're more than losing. I mean, if we think about, we're losing the social battle in terms of people sharing the memification of these nuanced issues, virtue signaling. So everyone all these channels that are, sharing really, really dangerous content for Jewish people and for Israel are being shared by, people who feel that if I trust this channel, trusted them for the last year, I'll share it, and then I'm a good person, I'm a good citizen for sharing this, I'll feel good. And they don't even realize that what they're sharing, because they don't have the background, is like really deeply, really bad for us. I think we're also losing the education and equipping our community war. Like, this feels funny to say, but I'm fairly affiliated, loosely engaged, went to Jewish day school, went to Jewish high school, went to Jewish summer camp, and I don't feel ready or equipped or comfortable getting into some of these rooms on Clubhouse or responding to people who are commenting on social media, because I don't really know all of the nuances, stats, and facts, and historical timelines. So I think we're losing that, and also I think we're losing the effective, responsible allocation of our very generally large resources that we have to the front lines of the people who tend to be, startup scrappy. You heard it before from Jewish on Campus, $0 budget, and they're the ones that are making the biggest impact. And that's just a wild imbalance of resource flow to most effective things we could be doing.
I want to drill down a little on that, because I think one of the things that I've experienced on social media is that people are repelled from anything they feel is inauthentic, right? So if the source is a Jewish organization, they'll say, well, it's a Jewish organization, what are they going to say? But if it comes from somebody that seems to authentically believe something, then it's more credible than even if it's coming from an actually more credible source. So how does that play into our response?
I think, again, if you personalize things, if you storytell, I think authenticity is super important. Listen, I want to respond to education because that is really a place where we need to put a lot of our resources, and that is young children. I think we're falling short, and we need to make sure that we're meeting the needs there and investing in this. We have a middle school curriculum now. We're taking a look at grammar school. We're in high schools where, and it's growing very slowly but methodically, because it is a strategy, because education has to be one of the most important places we put our efforts. Otherwise, what do we have? We also need to inspire. We cannot just educate without inspiration. We have to inspire everybody around us. Otherwise, why be involved? Why be here today? Why go home and follow up and be engaged? You have to be inspired. Your heart, your mind, you have to be inspired. And so what are we doing to inspire people? Not just inform them, but to inspire them. And every crisis, every challenge, which like we have on social media with millions of people against us, and it's dark, it feels dark, that's an opportunity. It provides us with an opportunity to really speak out. Judea Pearl, a professor at UCLA, the father of Daniel Pearl, who was beheaded in the beginning of the 2000s, he posted today against the Asian American Studies statement against Israel. He posted today, he went out on a limb with 8 other professors at UCLA. I was so excited to see it, and he's asking for everybody to repost it. So I'm telling you about this, so you look up Judea Pearl and you repost what he put on today, because he's out on a limb. So when you see someone like Judea Pearl go out on a limb, that's a time for us to get engaged. That's a time for us to join that person and lift them up.
In the conflict in May, was that a turning point? Is there some recalibration that has happened as a result of that? And if so, what is the new landscape and what are we supposed to do with that?
I don't think it was a turning point. I think others may disagree with this. I think we were building on this for years, and I think it was maybe obvious to those of us who were paying more attention. This is, and yes, there needs to be a recalibration, but no, there is not. I think, it's kind of quieted down a little bit. But, a few weeks before, a few months before this happened, a man who threw a Jewish woman out of her window screaming anti-Semitic statements the whole time got off free in France. Jews are being beaten in the streets across Europe, now across America. Jewish businesses were targeted before this happened. We've always been the scapegoat, and in the past few years especially, it's gotten a lot worse. But no, I don't think it was a turning point, and I think it's only getting worse.
So in that view, what happens in the way that it's talked about is the reaping of seeds that have been sown for years, and it's reflective of what people are already feeling. It might amplify it and accelerate it, but this wasn't some changing trajectory. This was a trajectory we're already on.
No, yeah.
Do you guys have similar different views?
I think it was a turning point, only because the war every single morning there was something really horrific going on during that. We've never seen anything like this. The flurry that we saw during those 11 days. I mean, we had 100 million interactions at Stand With Us just on Facebook. We got new members like by the thousands every day at Stand With Us because there was such a flurry. It was watershed in many ways. And then the follow-up after the war stopped, after the ceasefire, was different than anything we've ever seen. So I think you're right that there was this build-up to it. I agree with that. But that it was watershed, and a watershed moment for us as a Jewish community was also true. And that we have an opportunity now, never forget that every challenge that we face is an opportunity. So what is our opportunity right now is the question. How will this group be more engaged than ever because it's an opportunity?
Can I touch on that real quick? Turning
Of course,
point.
yeah.
So it was a turning point to me in two ways. One, all my life, my mom has been like more fear and scarcity. Like she doesn't save passwords on her browsers, and she always said like it could turn on a dime. It's good right now for Jewish people, but you never know. It could turn on a dime. And I was like, Mom, like I love you, but like that's kind of nuts. It's like 2021, and for me, it was definitely a turning point. Am I just like going? Either I was just ignorant or didn't want to believe it, but I'm now very clear from like about the state of anti-Semitism, the breadth and the depth and how real it is and how dangerous it is near and long term. And I think it was also a turning point, at least one that was now visible to everyone on the internet, that Free Palestine has become like party line for woke progressive America. And and I think we are our own worst enemy in early in the conflict. I was talking to an organization, a Jewish organization. They're like, "What should we say?" I was like, "Well, let's look at what like the other global organizations are saying." And I look at this one, and at that time, at least day 1, 2, 3, early, nothing. And I look at this one, and it's nothing. And I was like, "Oh my God!" I can only imagine they're not sharing something because no matter what they say, half of their constituency is going to be pissed off. And so I think somehow we desperately need a Free Palestine and let's have Israel live collectively in peace with our brothers and neighbors type of campaign that everyone across the aisle, whatever you believe in, can rally behind. Otherwise, we're just stuck in silence out of fear or out of being, silenced.
And one more point to that is I think, yeah, that's so good. We're not doing enough in social media, and we're not trying hard enough. We're not doing everything that we need to be. People are getting their news on social media, whether it's false or true. Truth is up for grabs at this point, which is also why I started A Wider Frame, because I didn't see a place on social media other than Stand With Us, a few others that were, but really like media news-based. They were reporting the facts. The facts matter, but we're not reporting on them. You need to contest the lies and the misinformation in some big way and to take back the narrative in some way, and we're not doing enough of that, so.
All right, Ari and Marisa, do you have questions for us from the audience?
First, just thank you so much, Neve, for doing this, and Roz, Eden, David, thank you for elevating, informing, and making sure there's a safe space for all Jewish people to connect in the platforms you have. Anti-Semitism, growing up, that every time you faced it, that word then translated into being taught the words never again. But as you've all just touched on today, our social media pages are being flooded with anti-Semitism. The false narratives are louder than the truths. And I think so many of us are at a loss for words. And we look at all three of you and the way you've been able to use your platforms to educate and inform. And we would love to hear the advice you could give us on how we can use social media to not only raise awareness about anti-Semitism, but also to combat the hate we're being faced every time we do post about our Jewish lives.
Can I begin? So everybody knows that Ben & Jerry's is now boycotting the West Bank, and so there's a a way that you can write to Ben & Jerry's, and they've already received, in less than 24 hours, they've already received 10,000 letters. We know this because we set up this platform. So how you engage and how you make a difference is you take an incident like Ben & Jerry's now making this decision to join the boycott movement against Israel, BDS, and you use it to educate. So you use it as a moment to write your own letter and to educate your friends and say, this is why this is wrong. You want to know why it's wrong? Go to the platform. It's right at the top of standwithus.com. It's right at the top. So it's easy for you to engage. And you can modify the letter any way you want, but do engage.
Okay, I'll go. First, I'll say, I think everyone needs to start better educating themselves. I know we talked about education. We need to start educating our children. I think a lot of us are realizing that our education has failed us in a lot of ways. So I think that's first. And second, I think we need to acknowledge that people are silencing themselves to protect themselves. But if you do anything, just do it. Post about it. Say something. Call it out, because it's bigger than you. It's bigger than your professional advancement. It's bigger than your mortgage. And there are resources to help you, and you're not going to be standing alone. But we need everybody. We need everybody's voices, and we need everyone's help. And if you leave with anything, I think it's just that. Just do more. Do it. Call it out, please. And I think the other question on that was, I didn't want to miss a point here.
When we have our social media pages and we do post about
Right.
our Jewish life, like Ari and I posted about our Israel trip, and we got flooded with hate about just us visiting Israel alone. How do we combat that?
So I think you lead with pride. Don't stop posting because of it, number one. You can lead with pride. You don't always just have to call out anti-Semitism. Be a proud Jew, always that first. When it comes to these people, if you want to converse with them, do. And I think it's worth having conversations with some people. But if you're just getting hate, you just have to ignore it. And you just have to keep soldiering on.
For those of us who represent Jewish organizations, I think we need to invest heavily in beautiful, creative, and content social media managers. I feel it's dramatically disproportionately funded from pretty much across the board. And we're seeing the content that we're up against is stunning. It looks great, it sounds good, and it's highly shareable. And more often than not in the Jewish world, we're seeing content that looks like, and that's just not acceptable, because that's something we can fully control, truly. We need to connect those groups and those people and those individuals working on this so we can have a container for conversation, for collaboration, for shared resources. Individuals, the public, we need like a handbook for how to handle all of these questions or all of these claims. Yeah, those are the primary things that I think we need. And just to touch on the point of an opportunity, I did a little bit of research yesterday in advance of this to just confirm my hypotheses about different things in anti-Semitism. And one of the things that I found that is, if I could leave you with at least one optimistic point for today, the question was, does the recent increase in anti-Semitism draw you closer or push you further away from your Jewish identity? And for those of you who have heard me in years past, I'm talking about how all these young people are leaning so far out, but you can't really see the chart. 47% all the way, it was a dial of like 1 to 5, all the way on the extreme of draws me closer. So we have an incredible opportunity for people who might not have been listening or might not have been tuned in before. Like, they're here, they're ready, we just have to deliver.
And I'm very happy to say that at JFNA we are investing in those resources. Stay tuned.
Marissa and I have preached that all year. We promise you guys. We were laughing. We were saying that. Couldn't agree more, David. And great to see you, by the way. And great panel. Loved what you guys have all said. Eden, I loved your line, truth is up for grabs. I think that's such a key line that I think we all need to remember as we leave today as well. And when you talk about advocacy. So maybe in closing, in a final question, advocacy not is just online, but unfortunately it's in major publications. And so what advice, again, would you give to everybody here to combat the anti-Semitism taking place in the New York Times? We just heard a congressman talking during lunch about, all the faces of the Gaza children that were killed on the cover of the New York Times. And that just sent a terrible message, the message you were talking about earlier. So what can we do in terms of major publications to make sure they know that they're really part of the problem in a lot of ways?
I mean, from where we sit, we have to expose these things, and we have to draw red lines, we have to point fingers, we have to write calm letters to the editor. We have to stand together against something like that, where, part of the story is left out. One of the biggest games that many people play in journalism is they leave out important context. Like, they tell you the end of the story. Yes, these children got killed during the Hamas war with Israel. But they didn't tell you the rest of the story. They didn't give you the backdrop. And it's going to be our job to say, well, wait a second, there's a backdrop here that you're not even mentioning. You're not mentioning Hamas. You're not mentioning terrorism, 4,000 rockets. I mean, where's the rest of the story here? So it's going to be our job to fill in those blanks. That's really important, and it's an opportunity.
Call it out. Do more. We need to do more. We need to write op-eds. We need to contact people. We need to use our networks. We need to do so much more than what we're doing in every way. I think it comes from a place of education, too. I mean, the New York Times, when they're sending us 40 push notifications about the Israeli conflict in a day, and maybe writing one article on an actual genocide that's going on, let's break that down to them, why that is anti-Semitic bias. I think I always reference the 3D test of anti-Semitism, which I don't know that a lot of people know or utilize, which is the 3 Ds are if you're demonizing Israel, if you're holding Israel to double standards, and if you are delegitimizing Israel. So, I think the people in power, first of all, and this is another point, we don't even have a consensus in the Jewish community what anti-Semitism is. We need to, we need a definition. We need an understanding of it ourselves, and then we need to teach it. And we need to show people why what they're doing is perpetuating anti-Semitism. And I think lastly, we need to create new institutions. I think the institutions that exist that are highly politicized and highly divisive, I think there's a lot of people in the middle that see why this is wrong, and they're in search and they're hungry for truth. And so we need to support the people who are starting these new institutions, and we just need new ones, I think. So that's...
On that, and create our own media channels. We need maybe very smart PR people to figure out the traditional media world, but in the meantime, we have the people, we have the tools, definitely have the resources. Let's just create our own media channels, like some of the ones we've heard from today, who are doing really powerful work and could use a lot of resources to do it harder, do it further, and be there where we need them.
I would just like to close with one additional thought on all of this, is that I think that we've heard today that it's so important for us to be engaged and strategic about our use of social media. I would just add on top of that, as a political reporter for years, the sort of phrase that went around was, Twitter is not real life. If you predicted elections based on Twitter, you'd get it wrong every time. Twitter is one sphere and the real world is a different sphere. It's not that they're not connected, they are, and it's important. So I would say to everybody, based on everything that we've heard today, get on social media, follow the people that you need to follow, learn about it, but then when you're done, close social media and have a conversation with your friends and with the people that you know, because that conversation is going to do more than a tweet ever could. So maybe that's just a little bit more of a hopeful note after a pretty dire assessment of what's going on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Will everyone please join me for the panel? Thank you very much. Yes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.